Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of our love story Q&A with a couples counselor. Hello to my very favorite couples counselor.
Hi, how are you?
Doing awesome. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. It's always a pleasure.
It's always
I've
a good
done
time.
it for 3 years.
Always a good time.
Yes. One of my favorite episodes, or one of my favorite shows of the month, I should say. I learned so much here, and I have to really extend some appreciation to you for that. So thank you for your time, for being here, for sharing your expertise. I know there's probably 100 other things you could be doing right now, Dyanna, and you choose to spend your time with us. And for that, I'm super grateful. And I know that our audience members are too, because I get the feedback. So
thank you. I'm super honored to be here. I love being here. And, if anything that we can impart on someone feels helpful or helps someone feel like seen or validated, that just makes me feel good. It makes it worth it for someone to feel seen. You know what I mean? So I love being here.
Heck yeah, that's big, giant, huge. I will always say it. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. The biggest aha moment that I had out of therapy, whether that be couples therapy or individual, is the being seen and heard part. It is so giant. It is really everything, I feel like. Definitely. At that point, anything else can be fixed. It's just the being seen and heard part.
Definitely. And it's kind of eye-opening the more you talk to people, how many people don't know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And that feels so sad. So to be a part of that, even once a month or whenever people are watching, is great. I love it.
Yay. So let's dive in, both feet. This is a topic that we've talked about before. This is something that we hear a lot of in your profession, also in mine. I work with a lot of divorcing couples, and let's go back to, so usually when I get them, they are pretty much on that road, right? Like they've already kind of decided to split household, that sort of thing. But let's go a step back to just before that, and the time period of the decision. Like, when does the decision get made? When is it really apparent that it's going down the big D road? Let's jump into that. I know you have some really good, juicy stuff for us.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic because there's so much that goes into when someone decides, like, is this really it? And sometimes those decisions are made unilaterally, meaning just like one person is like, I'm done, you know what I mean? And not really giving the other person the opportunity to try to like discern if this is going to work out or not. So, one of the biggest parts that I think are helpful, one of the biggest steps, I guess I should say, that are helpful when you're making that decision, you're kind of on the fence, is like, go to discernment counseling. And that is basically at least 6 months of really saying, okay, we're going to do everything that we can. We're going to learn the tools that we need to. We're going to address like what's missing or what's wrong in the relationship, give it everything we've got. If at the end of the 6 months, like one of three things will happen. One is like, nope, we've decided like this is just not happening. It's not working. We're better off apart. We're happier apart. Or no, we're definitely staying together. Like, we've learned so much. We've done a lot of work and we're definitely going to stay together. Or the third option is like, no, we're doing really well, but like we want to keep going. Like, we want to keep like seeing where this is going to take us. You know what I mean? Which means like staying together, but like, let's just extend this a little bit longer. And so I don't think a lot of couples give themselves the benefit of the doubt of identifying discernment, which is why, as I've said in the past, like a lot of couples use couples counseling as like a last ditch effort, right?
Right.
So on average, like couples wait 7 years after having issues in the relationship to seek couples counseling. 7 years is a really long time. And there's like a lot of things that can happen in a 7-year period of time, a lot of resentment that builds up, all of those things. So if you're using this as we should go to couples counseling or we should divorce, like, it's going to be really challenging, right? Because you're being asked to change the way that you look at things, your perspective on things, being able to challenge your own experiences, your own childhood, your own attachment, like so many things that go into like our relationships and what we contribute to a relationship, that it's really difficult. And in some ways it probably feels easier. Like, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to call it quits and wash our hands of it. You know what I mean? And so when you're in a place of being so resentful in your relationship, it's hard to dig deep and be like, okay, I'm willing to look at myself here and what I'm contributing and what my role is in it. You know what I mean? And so like, it's really challenging once you're at that point of being like really angry or even feeling hopeless to do that. But I think it's a really wise choice for couples to make so that they can say with confidence, we did what we could do and we addressed everything that we could. And I feel like it's just not, we're just not compatible. It's just not working. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the term that you used, was it, did I hear correctly, discernment?
Discernment, yes.
What is the difference between discernment and a normal session?
Yeah, with discernment counseling, you're going into it with the expectation that like, this is discernment counseling. Like, this is like now or never. Like, we're either going to give this 6 months or we're not going to stay together, sort of thing, like those 3 options I was talking about. So if you're just going to couples counseling for maintenance or to resolve conflict or to communicate better or to heal from like infidelity, trauma, like all of those things, like there isn't like a timeline on that. Like there isn't a set, and I get asked that all the time, like how long should we expect to be in counseling? Like there is no answer to that. It's all subjective based on what you want to get out of it.
Right.
But discernment is like a set period of time. And so with those goals in mind, all of the goals are just shrunk down to a 6-month period. And you're doing really frequent check-ins of like, okay, so these are the things that you said you wanted to accomplish. How are we doing so far? Not doing great on those, but doing really great on these. So that's what makes it different, is the expectation that like, this is going to be a 6-month period. And like, then we're going to call it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Do you find that the majority, and maybe this is a hard question to answer, but do you find that the majority of your clients end up staying together through those types of sessions, or does that really just shine the light on the red flags?
You know, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that the couples that can really reflect on themselves and really want to grow through the experience, meaning whether we stay together or not, like I'm looking to see how much I can get out of this experience. I want to get as much as possible. Those are the couples that tend to stay together. So even at the end of the 6-month period, they might be like, yeah, we still have some work to do, but like we're going to continue. And like we have a renewed hope for our relationship, but we're going to keep going with it. You know what I mean? But the couples that come into it as like a last ditch effort, and then they're being asked to like do things differently or look at things differently, that don't want to embrace that change at all. Those are the ones that typically either end before the discernment period is over, or they don't stay together after the discernment period's over. Some, I shouldn't say a lot, but some people think that when they go into discernment counseling, it's going to be very clear to the therapist whose fault this is, and who is the reason why we're here, and like, let's just fix them. You know what I mean? And when they come in, at least with me, and they find out that that's not the case, and that both of you are going to be held accountable for your behavior, sometimes those individuals that's not what they signed up for. That's not really what they wanted. And so those couples tend to have poor outcomes in terms of staying together than the ones that are willing to be vulnerable and say like, hey, okay, maybe I have a bigger role here than I think I do. Even as much as I'm angry and maybe there's been some injuries here, like I'm a contributor here and I'm ready to figure out like what that is.
Do you ever find anybody in those sessions that are at 0%? Like they're just like, I don't even know why I'm here kind of thing. I'm 0% wanting to continue the relationship.
Sure. I've had, a client say like, I'm like at a 0 when I scale, like, out of 1 to 10, like 10 being like, I'm all in. And 1 being like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. And they'll give me like a 0. I'm like, that's totally fair. I totally hear where you're at. And like, that's valid, but you are here. You did show up. So like, maybe it's a 1 and you won't know what progress feels like unless you put a low number on it. So don't be discouraged by the low number. That's honest. And it's where you're at. How do we see what progress is if you're not honest about where you're at? So there are certainly times where clients are like at a 1 or a 2 or something, and their partner's like, oh, I'm at an 8. Like, I really want this to work out. I really want this. I don't want a divorce, those types of things. And they get really discouraged by hearing that, you know what I mean? That like, I'm at a 1 or a 2. And it's like, that's okay. Like that hurts. It stings. It feels really spicy. I get it. But you want them to be honest with you. And you also want to see what progress looks like. So just stick with it.
What does progress look like? How are you evaluating that?
Yeah, progress can be found in a variety of different ways. One of the ways that I like to use is scaling, which is the 1 to 10 that I was just talking about. So we take a variety of topics based on their goals. Like, okay, so how are you feeling about, the emotional safety in the relationship? And we talk a little bit more in detail about what their goals are with that. Okay, a scale of 1 to 10, 10, like we're crushing it. And 1 is like, now we haven't really done anything with that at all. And then they scale it. And then you're recording those numbers that they're giving you. And then you're able to look back and historically see what that progress looks like. Hey, like 4 weeks ago, you were at a 4 and now you're at a 7. Like that's huge. It's a huge jump in a few weeks. You know what I mean? And so it's really encouraging and it gives people hope when they can literally see what that number is and seeing it go up. You know what I mean? And rarely, I mean, it happens sometimes, rarely it goes down. And that's usually when we're digging into some really tough stuff that we weren't being 100% honest about in the first place. And so that can affect and shake the trust up a little bit. But if you're willing to just stick with it, like stick with the process, I think that you will find it very rewarding to do that, right? Like to give your partner the, like, I'm here to give you the benefit of the doubt. And this is the time that I'm giving it, whether we're in discernment or not. And so I'm committed to giving you that space to teach me something different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have to imagine that it can be difficult for some individuals to be completely transparent, to come to the table with total unfiltered honesty. Do you see that quite a bit?
All the time, especially if a couple is coming in because of, let's say like infidelity, right? And like, so, the husband has cheated. And so they're in counseling now to repair that. She's feeling very hurt, understandably. Her trust has been shaken. She doesn't feel the emotional connection anymore. They're not having sex anymore. All of these things that are showing how much she's hurt. And they come in to talk about that. They come in to talk about the infidelity, how to move on from the infidelity, how to heal from that. And sometimes that puts the quote unquote offender, like the husband in this case, right, on the defensive, like immediately. Mm-hmm. So sometimes they come in and think like, oh, well, this is my fault. I did it. And so this is going to be 50 minutes of being piled on about we're here because of me and I made a poor choice. And if we get a divorce, it's my fault and all of those things. And it's really hard to be vulnerable if you're in a position where like you're backed up against a wall and you're feeling defensive. You know what I mean? So in part, some of the most difficult parts in the beginning of treatment for a couple that are experiencing something like that, which is very, very common, is to naturally build that rapport with that other partner, in this case, the husband, that like, listen, dude, like, I'm not coming for you. Like, I'm just trying to find out like what your motivation was, like how you're feeling about the emotional connection in the relationship. What were you seeking outside of the relationship that you didn't feel like you were getting? Why didn't you feel like you could communicate that? Let's learn a little bit about you and like your roles, and like gender roles certainly play a role in that. Like your attachment from childhood, like attachment injuries from previous relationships, like all of those things. Like, I'm just curious, like, tell me about it. You know what I mean? And sometimes building that trust, like, can take a while. That like, I'm not just here to blame you for the whole thing, because that's not accurate. I just want to learn more. And sometimes when we learn more, it provides a little bit more of like the humanness for their partner, that like we are all flawed human beings. And while you made a decision that greatly hurt me, and now we're going to have to work on healing me too, maybe I can see this a little bit differently, a little bit more objectively, so that you can heal yourself in the process too. So we know how this happens, right? Like, I want to know how this happens so that we can prevent it from happening again. And we can't do that unless we understand how and why we got here, right? Like, if we're just like, okay, I have a client that was saying the same stuff, like, lock down your social media. You're not allowed to have any friends that are women. We have to have a shared social media account, like, putting all these restrictions on him. And, I had to get really curious with her about like, do you think that is going to be the solve? Do you think that's going to build your trust? Or do you think it would be likely that your trust would be restored if you understood why he was doing it in the first place, rather than just like cutting all these things out of his life? Because let's face it, if someone's going to cheat, they're going to do it. They're going to find a way to do it unless they have that unmet need met or at least seen and understood, you know?
Of course. And that feels very parental. Like, and no one, I'm sorry, but that's not a turn on for anybody that I know.
No, absolutely not. But why do we get into controlling like behaviors, right? We're scared. Like anytime that we're trying to be controlling or control a situation or a person, it's because we feel scared. So that's coming out of a place of fear. I don't want to be cheated on again. I don't want to have to get a divorce. I want to do these things. So I'm going to control the things that you do to make it less likely that those things will happen. But in reality, doing that control bit isn't building trust at all. It's just micromanaging, right?
Yeah.
But you're not building the emotional safety or the emotional intimacy, because rarely, spoiler, rarely is that enough.
Yeah.
Then it's going to be, who are you talking to on the phone?
Yeah.
Oh, I was checking the phone logs when the phone bill came in. And it's rarely enough, those things that you put in, that you implement to try to rebuild trust, just in the wrong ways. So sometimes hearing the why is really painful and feels really spicy. But wouldn't you rather know why so that we can prevent that from happening again, rather than just trying to control another person? Because I don't think that way is going to work. It doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely not. So are there some red flags or some particular situations where, yeah, like it's inevitable this couple's not going to make it?
Yeah, definitely. First, I'd kind of like to give the opposite side of the coin here of like common not predictors of divorce, that I think subjectively a lot of people believe like, oh yeah, that's definitely like a deal breaker for me. Now, I'll preface that with saying everyone is entitled to have their own boundaries, their own expectations, their own line in the sand. Like you do you got to do what you got to do to make yourself feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. I throw no shade at whatever anyone's boundaries are. Those are yours for a reason. But it doesn't automatically mean that infidelity has to lead to divorce, right? It's not necessarily a thing. There are certain situations where people might think, you see it on social media all the time, like division of workload. You know what I mean? Oh, my husband doesn't help, with the baby, doesn't help with the household chores. And like, you see in the comments, like, oh, you should just leave. Like you deserve better than that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I understand what you're saying. Like you deserve to be supported. You deserve to have help. But is that a predictor for divorce, or is there much more that can happen way before that? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So again, it's subjective what people think are the predictors for divorce, but I would definitely encourage anyone who's in that spot right now, like, is this a reason to get divorced? Like, it's probably deeper and more than just what you think qualifies for a divorce. You know what I mean? Do you want a divorce after infidelity, or do you really love that person and you want to make it work, but you can't be hurt again, right? Yeah. So how can you protect yourself and stay with that person if you choose to? There's no right, wrong, or otherwise to doing that. It's just a different perspective. You know what I mean? The things that can't be changed in a relationship that are most likely to result in divorce are feelings of like contempt. When your partner is criticizing you consistently, is contemptuous towards you, meaning like, I'm up here, you're down here. You always do this, you never do that, and unwilling to see how their behaviors and their words are negatively impacting the relationship. Any sort of resistance to that is usually a pretty high predictor of divorce, right? Like if I'm unwilling to take any ownership or accountability in what I'm doing and what I'm contributing to this relationship, like, I mean, what do you do with that, right? Like, then you live your life, but like you have to let, her or him go. Yeah. And let them live the life that they deserve to have as well, because everyone deserves to be happy. You know what I mean? One of the other things that can be like a strong predictor of divorce too is mismatched cultural or religious beliefs. And that isn't at 100% all the time, but a lot of times couples get married or get together thinking that like, oh, we can navigate those things. Like it'll be fine. Oh, we can combine holidays together, or, we can raise our kids with both sets of beliefs or whatever. But then we move into it too quickly, and then we start to learn more about what some of those expectations are, like gender expectations, cultural expectations, all of those things. And then we find ourselves like, oh gosh, like I'm having to sacrifice an awful lot and compromise an awful lot to stay in this relationship. And I'm not really sure this is the life that I want.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is the saddest kind of divorce, right? Like divorce is sad all around. It is such a heavy, heavy grief adjustment. But the couples that I have seen that have amicably decided that, like, you know what, you deserve to be happy and I deserve to be happy, but I don't think us together is going to make both of us happy, is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But they both know that, like, we deserve better than what we're doing to each other right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's so heartbreaking, but at the same time, it can be perceived as the biggest gift that you can give the person that you care so deeply about, that we are not as compatible as I thought we were. And you shouldn't change who you are, because you are just fine the way you are. And I don't want to change who I am because I feel like I'm just fine the way that I am. We're just not great for each other. And so, like, I want to set you free. Like, I want you to go find your person that you're going to be compatible with. And it's traumatic. It's sad. There's a lot of grief. But again, to be in a relationship with someone that can be so self-aware and compassionate enough to know that, like, I don't want to hurt you anymore, is by all rights sort of the quote unquote best type of divorce you can get.
Yeah. And it sounds like in that particular situation, there's a lot of growth. There's a lot of learning, maybe even the most learning about yourself. Right. And so that is never lost. And that is carried to the next life and the next chapter. And I feel like where, it was an end, like a door closed, but it kind of opens another door too, because now you're at that spot with yourself, hopefully, that you're a little more clear on what it is that you're compatible with, or what it is you're looking for, and what it is you want. And when we're clear with that, that's a little more conducive to finding what you want, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those tend to have the greatest co-parenting outcomes as well. When you can divorce amicably, but still have, like, a lot of respect for each other and a lot of compassion for each other, is obviously going to work out better for the kids as well, if there's kids involved. Definitely.
Absolutely. I'm actually thinking of a friend of mine from way back, like decades ago, that went through a divorce with his spouse, and they had children together, 2 of them, and they co-parented amazingly, almost like they just lived in 2 different houses. You know what I mean? And so holidays, everything, like, just co-parented very well. In fact, the missus ended up having a 3rd child with her second husband, and the mister from the first relationship, the first marriage, would go get his kids, his 2, and he'd pick up the 3rd one too. And they would go out and go have, dinner or whatever fun thing he was doing with the 2 other kids. He didn't want the little girl to feel left out. And so he took her daughter as well. And it was cool and fun. I love that. How awesome of an example is that for our kids? Hey, things sometimes don't work out. Communicate, figure out the best way to make it work for everybody, kind of thing,
Absolutely. But we are doomed to repeat what we don't fix. So even if you're sitting here listening and you're on the fence about contemplating a divorce, like, what is that going to fix? Yeah. Right? Like, is it going to get you out of a relationship where you might repeat the same cycle with someone else? Are you going to be attracted to the same type of person in your next relationship? Because that's what we do. We gravitate towards what's familiar and what feels safe, predictable. Even if logically we know that that's not what we want, like it's not going to be good for us, we will 9 times out of 10 go for what feels familiar because we know what to expect. I know how this movie ends.
Yep.
I don't know how that movie ends over there. And so even though that might logically be better for me, I don't know what to do with that. So I'm just going to go with what feels familiar and more predictable. So I think a lot of the predictors that people feel are definites, like how can we come back from that? Infidelity, resentment, you can come back from that. You know what I mean? If you're willing to put in the work, you can come back from that. There are certainly conditions in which, like, a little disclaimer here, like certainly conditions that you do not have to tolerate or stay with, which is anything that's abusive in any form, verbally, physically, emotionally, like financially, like none of those situations nobody has to stay in or justify why they have to stay in that. You don't. So when we're talking here, like, those are not the situations that I'm referring to.
Right. I think
those
that's
are situations that, like, you should stay safe and do what you need to do, take care of yourself, your own well-being, your kids' well-being, so on and so forth. But in relationships and marriages where those conditions don't exist, but we're talking about built up resentment from communication errors and unresolved conflict and infidelity and, all of those things, money is a big one too. In-laws, boundaries, parenting approaches, all of those things are not necessarily deal breakers. They're not necessarily predictors of divorce. Those are less predictors of divorce than what are you bringing to the table to improve. Those things you can't make another person do anything. Right. So if someone's not going to reflect on themselves or take any accountability for themselves or willing to address whatever contempt or criticism they have for their partner, those are bigger predictors of divorce than you being cheated on.
Yeah.
And again, those are all subjective and up to you. There is no choose your own adventure. You have to live your life the way that is going to serve you the most and make you happy. But I don't want anyone listening to feel like, I've been cheated on, we're doomed, we're going to get a divorce. I need to figure this out. Like, well, hang on a second. Like, do you love this person still? Do you feel like there's enough in this relationship that's worth salvaging? If yes, then let's dig in. Let's do the tough stuff and the work that's required here to come back from this, because it is possible. I won't tell you that it's easy. It's very difficult, but you're going to get what you want out of it at the end, whether it's discernment or you guys stay together and you continue couples counseling to work on those communication issues, all those things that landed you there in the first place.
Yeah. I think that is so important. And thank you for saying that. And thank you for clarifying what we're talking about versus what we're not talking about, because I think that is very important for people to know as well. We certainly are not here, in support of abusive relationships and keeping those going. So just louder for those in the back. Anything else? I mean, I know it's kind of a huge topic and we probably talk all day, but is there anything else that you wanted to add to this particular episode that we didn't?
I would say, how do I say that at the end? I would say if you can get your partner's buy-in to let's just try it. Let's just try couples counseling for 6 months. If you really feel like we are that close to the edge here of divorcing, let's just try, because at the end of the day, we're going to get something really valuable out of it, whether we stay together or not.
Yeah.
If you can get your partner's buy-in and get them into the room, I'll help the rest of the way and help build that rapport and that trust so that you guys can see this doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation. There's so much to learn about each other that we don't know, things that don't come up until they become a problem.
Yeah.
So if you can get that buy-in, if you guys can just agree that we both want better for us, then just do it. Just do it. You have so much more to lose by not.
Yeah.
So just do it.
I agree. Definitely an important, very big step.
Absolutely. It's so scary. It's incredibly scary and vulnerable. And all of the things, but you're worth it. Your relationship is worth it. You got here for a reason. You guys are together for a reason.
Absolutely agree.
To fight for it.
Yeah. So what does it look like? How do they get into that room?
Yeah, well, to get into my room, you just go to my website, DyannaEiselTherapy.com. You can schedule a free phone consultation, which I love doing phone consultations. You get to know me a little bit more. You get to vibe check and make sure it's there, right? And then you get to learn a little bit about what the process looks like. I walk you through what to expect and those sorts of things. And then we can dig in and get started.
I love that. Well, thank you again so much, Dyanna, for all of that amazing value.
And you know what? It's Valentine's Day.
It is.
So happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you.
I want to give away a date night for some of our listeners.
Yay.
Because I think everyone deserves a date night. And sometimes it's really hard to get out to go to a date night when we have no babysitter or we're just really busy and we can't carve out enough time. So I'm giving away a date night to anyone that follows. It's all you have to do. It's literally all you have to do. Follow me on Instagram and like your 3 favorite posts. And if you comment done when you're done with that, and then comment Mom Nation AZ, you get 2 entries instead of just 1.
Oh, that's so sweet of you.
Have to learn? What do you have to learn here? All of the things. And then what do you have to get here? I'm giving away a super fuzzy faux fur blanket so you guys can snuggle.
Aww.
$50 in DoorDash, so you don't even have to go anywhere to get your dinner. And then I'm giving away a couples after dark expansion pack.
Ooh.
For Q&A.
Do tell.
So fun. So a couples Q&A, little trivia quiz to get to know about each other. And then I'm also adding in the expansion pack, which is the after dark edition, to get a little spicy. So it gives you something fun to do for a few hours. Even if you can't get out of the house, you have something fun to do. I'm closing it at midnight tonight. So go and enter. And
hurry up
tomorrow. Hurry up.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Dyanna. Always a pleasure. And thank you for your generosity. That is really super cute and sweet. And I appreciate it so much. And I know our audience members do too. Guys, if you want to check out any of our previous episodes with Dyanna, hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at Mom Nation USA. That's our handle. Scroll down just a little ways and you will see the Our Love Story playlist. If you prefer the podcast style on your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for Mom Nation Talk Radio. There you will find us. Same deal. Notify yourself by clicking that little bell, right? Or whatever it looks like on the platform that you're on. Download, review, like us, all the things, and you will never miss an episode. We will see you next month.